Don't embarrass me tonight. Just smile, nod, and don't bring up your job. That's what my dad said as we stepped out of the car. Not hello, not you look nice, not even I'm glad you're here. Just that. Just, don't embarrass me. I'm 33. My name is Elise Moreno. And on that particular night, I wasn't his daughter. I was a liability in heels. It's funny. People talk about the silence of disappointment, but they forget how loud it can be. In the clink of a glass, the way eyes slide past you in a crowded room, the absence of your name in a toast. That dinner, it wasn't for me. It was for my father, Regional Director of Public Works, 30 years in the game, getting some kind of golden clock or fake brass plaque. All his colleagues, their wives, the mayor was even supposed to show. I was there because Mom said it would look weird if I didn't come, not because anyone really wanted me there. Do you know what it feels like to be decorative but disposable? I walked through the ballroom like wallpaper. Blue velvet chairs, glass plates, floral centerpieces. Everything gleamed like pride, and I faded. They sat me at the far end of the table, next to someone's cousin who couldn't remember my name even after I repeated it twice. "So what do you do again?" he asked between bites of filet. "Emergency medical services," I replied. He blinked. "Oh, like an ambulance driver?" "I was a paramedic," I clarified. He sipped his wine. "Oh, huh. Didn't think girls lasted long in that." That was the moment I excused myself to the restroom and seriously considered crawling out the window. But instead, I stood in front of the mirror. Fluorescent lights, beige walls, a bouquet of roses dying on the sink. I looked at my reflection. Navy dress, hair pulled back, scar on my neck just visible where the collar dipped. It never fully healed. Neither did a lot of things. A question I always ask myself, and I'd like to ask you now. Have you ever been so invisible to your own blood that strangers know more about your sacrifices? If you've ever been the forgotten one, the letdown, the sibling who didn't make it, please take a moment to subscribe to this channel. Leave a comment. Tell me where you're listening from. And if you're here, if you've been through it, I see you. I really do. Now, let's listen to my story journey. After the dinner, I walked to the car alone. Dad was still inside, taking photos, laughing with the mayor. Mom sent me a text. "Wait in the car. We're doing a group pic." I sat behind the steering wheel, hands gripping leather like it was the only thing keeping me from flying apart. That was the night I made peace with something. They didn't want to understand me, and I didn't owe them my story. But before all that, before the formal dinners and the polite dismissals and my seat at the end of the table, there was a boy, and there was a fire, and I stopped breathing to save him. There's a smell that never leaves your skin. It's not just smoke, it's burnt rubber, scorched insulation, the acrid ghost of melting plastic and old wallpaper and dreams. I used to scrub my hands raw with lemon and baking soda, but the scent always found a way back, like a bruise under the skin. It was the summer of 2020 when it happened. The day was overcast, the kind of heat that stuck to your ribs. We got the call at 4:13 p.m. Residential fire, possible entrapment, juvenile male, single structure. I was on shift at Station 12, my 5th year as a paramedic. By then, I was used to the chaos. You learn to move through sirens like you're underwater. Steady, focused, detached. But that call was different. When we pulled up, the house was already bleeding smoke from the second story. Neighbors were screaming. Someone was holding a garden hose, useless against the blaze, and that's when I heard it. A cry, faint, high-pitched, inside. "Someone's still in there," a woman shouted. "My nephew, he's upstairs." I didn't think, didn't wait for backup, didn't calculate oxygen burn time or check for ladder assist. I just ran. Helmet down. Mask on. The heat slapped me in the face like a wall of fury. I made it halfway up the staircase before the railing gave way under my hand. The smoke was thick, blacker than midnight. No visibility, no sound, except the groan of timber above me and the pounding of my own pulse in my ears. I found him in the far bedroom. He was curled up near the closet, coughing, dazed, maybe 10 years old. His lips were blue. He couldn't even cry anymore. I reached for him. He flinched. I remember saying something over and over through the mask. Hey, hey, you're okay. I got you. I got you. I carried him out, one arm under his knees, the other cradling his head. I could feel the heat biting into my neck through the gaps in my gear. Halfway down, the ceiling collapsed behind us. We were 10 seconds away from being names on a memorial wall. When we broke through the front door, I staggered, dropped to my knees, and then... nothing. Lights out. I woke up 2 days later. Burns across my collarbone, left thigh, and back. Dislocated shoulder. Mild concussion. Smoke inhalation. And the boy? He lived. He had second-degree burns and a fractured ankle. But he lived. No one told me his name. I never asked. People think saving a life feels like glory, but sometimes it just feels like pain. There were no medals in that moment. No applause. Just the steady beep of a monitor, the itchy stiffness of a hospital gown, and the creeping awareness that I might not go back. The surgeon said I'd be okay. Eventually. But I'd have to relearn basic movement. I couldn't lift my arm above my head without feeling like it was tearing. My lungs wheezed like broken harmonicas, and I still remember the call with my mom, 2 weeks in. Oh, that's terrible, honey. Well, maybe it's time you looked into something more stable. Your cousin just got a job at a dental supply company. They're hiring. I had just risked my life to pull a child out of fire, and she wanted me to sell toothbrushes. No one visited. No flowers. Not even a card. Dad didn't call. Maybe he was busy. Or maybe it was easier to pretend his daughter hadn't turned out to be some reckless city paramedic playing superhero. All I knew was that the scar across my left shoulder healed faster than the one on my heart. But that day in the fire, that boy. He was the reason I didn't walk away from life entirely. I held on to that moment like a thread, even when everything else unraveled. The medal came in a plain envelope. No fanfare, no brass band. Just a stiff cream-colored envelope with a return address from the Office of Emergency Services. Inside, a certificate, a letter of commendation, and a small velvet box holding a silver medallion. Outstanding bravery in the line of duty, it read. My name etched clean and quiet beneath a seal I didn't recognize. I remember holding it in my palm, the weight heavier than I expected. Not in metal, in memory, 11 weeks post-recovery. I was back in my apartment, still sleeping on the recliner because my back stiffened too much in bed. The curtains were always drawn, mostly to block the sun, partly because I hadn't opened them since I got back. Sunlight felt like too much. Everything did. I didn't tell anyone about the medal. Not my friends, not my family, not even the few coworkers who'd stayed in touch. Because no one had asked. And when no one asks, you start to believe your story doesn't matter. A week later, I received a check. $25,000 from the state's Emergency Relief Fund. A week after that, another $75,000. Then a final sum labeled Survivor's Hero Grant, $200,000. It was like the government was trying to pay me to disappear. I tucked the checks into a fireproof safe and told myself I'd deal with them later. But the truth is, I didn't want to touch them. Because they weren't a reward. They were reparations. I tried to go back to work once. Just one shift. 2 months later. I got halfway to the station, saw the flashing lights of another ambulance at an intersection, and pulled over. Parked. Cried. I couldn't breathe. The thought of stepping back into that uniform, of hearing another siren, of seeing another body pulled from wreckage. It wasn't courage I lacked. It was something deeper. I didn't feel like I belonged in that world anymore. So I quit. No retirement party, no official goodbye. I mailed in my badge with a note. Thank you for letting me serve. No one replied. I moved to Sacramento, started working with a local nonprofit that teaches survival skills to middle and high school kids. I ran fire evacuation drills, basic CPR training, wilderness rescue prep. It wasn't glamorous, but it mattered. And no one there knew about the fire, or the boy, or the medal. I liked it that way. I rented a one-bedroom above a laundromat that always smelled faintly of bleach and lavender. It was quiet, clean, anonymous. But every now and then I'd open the drawer where I kept the medal, just for a moment, just to remind myself that it wasn't a dream, that it did happen, that I did something. Once. Sometimes I'd think about calling my dad, just to say, I didn't embarrass you, I saved a life. But I never did. Because deep down, I knew he wouldn't hear it. Not really. To him, I was still the girl who dropped out of pre-med. Still the disappointment. Still the one who didn't become someone you could name drop at a company dinner. So I stayed silent. Until the night I was invited back home. Mom's voice on the phone was unusually chipper. Your father's boss is retiring, she said. There's a celebration. Very classy. It would mean a lot if you came. Why now? I asked. She hesitated. It's important. For the family. It'll be good for your father. That's how I ended up standing in front of a mirror again, years later, brushing lint off a black blouse and wondering if I still looked like someone no one would sit beside. I told myself I'd just stay an hour. Smile. Nod. Keep quiet. But that night, something happened. Something that cracked open everything I'd locked away. The restaurant was the kind that served ego with the entrees. You know the type. White tablecloths stiff with starch. Wine lists longer than most novels. Chandeliers that looked like frozen fireworks. The kind of place where laughter is always measured and introductions are made with titles, not names. I walked in 10 minutes early because I'm never late to things I dread. Dad was already there, of course, standing near the entrance, shaking hands, back straight like an oak beam, face locked in a permanent polite grin. Next to him was Mom, glowing in soft beige and pearls, clutching her little designer handbag like it was shielding her from the reality of her middle child's presence. Elise, she said, kissing the air near my cheek. You made it. Yeah, I replied. You asked. Dad's eyes scanned my outfit once, professional but plain, and he gave a tight nod, like I'd passed a silent inspection. Then he turned back to his boss. This is my daughter. She works in youth outreach. That was new. Usually I'm taking a break, or doing something with the schools, I think. The man he was talking to turned toward me. Kind smile, tired eyes, maybe mid-60s. I didn't know you had a daughter, he said, extending a hand. I'm Ken. Nice to meet you, I said, shaking his hand. I caught Dad's wince. Ken. Not Mr. Hughes. Another mark against me. Dinner began with speeches, followed by clinking glasses, followed by far too much talk about golf. I was seated between an elderly woman who kept asking if I was between jobs and a young guy who assumed I must have been someone's date. I smiled. I sipped water. I let the noise flow over me like static. And then, as the main course was served and someone started a rambling story about hiking in Peru. Ken leaned toward me, his brow furrowed. Sorry, he said. I know this is strange, but have we met before? I blink. I don't think so. He narrowed his eyes. Did you ever work emergency response? My fork pauses midair. Yes. Sacramento? He asks, slower now. My stomach tightens. He sits back in his chair, eyes widening. No way. The table quiets. Ken turns to my father. This is her? He asks. This is the one you were talking about? Dad looks confused. What are you talking about? Ken turns back to me. You pulled a kid out of a fire, summer of 2020, 2-story house, North End, he was 10. I nod, the air thickening in my chest. That was my son, he says, voice cracking. Eli. The silence that follows is deafening. I feel every eye turn toward me. Even the waitstaff pause, sensing a shift. Ken continues, louder now, clearer. She carried him down 2 flights with a broken shoulder, passed out in the front yard. Doctors said if she'd been 30 seconds later, he wouldn't have made it. Dad stares at me like he's seeing a ghost. Mom's hand clutches her wine glass. A cousin drops his knife onto his plate with a loud clatter. I've been trying to track her down for years, Ken says, almost breathless. I asked around. No one ever gave me a name. Just a female paramedic, off duty, disappeared after the rescue. And all this time, she's your daughter? The table is utterly still, and then he stands, raises his glass. To Elise, he says, the woman who saved my son's life. The applause starts slowly, a few hesitant claps, then a wave. I don't stand. I don't smile. I just sit there, a forkful of cold salmon still in my hand, watching my father's face turn a shade paler than I've ever seen. The applause fades. People return to their meals, but everything has shifted. Mom leans in, voice trembling. Why didn't you tell us? She whispers. Her eyes are wide, mascara starting to smudge. I look at her. I did. In my way. You just didn't ask. Dad is quiet. He looks down at his plate like it holds answers. And I realize in that moment, they never wanted the truth. They only ever wanted the version of me they could be proud of in public. And now that truth has a face, a name, and a standing ovation. I don't remember eating dessert. I remember the sugar crust cracking on the crème brûlée, but not the taste. I remember Ken's son, Eli, coming over to shake my hand, now taller than I am. His voice cracked with adolescence as he said, My mom always told me an angel pulled me out. I remember people clapping again. More handshakes, more suddenly interested smiles from relatives who once forgot my birthday, and I remember my father avoiding my eyes for the rest of the night. After dinner, as the guests began trickling out into the warm night air, my parents pulled me aside into the quiet of the coat check alcove. It smelled like old wood and lemon polish. My heels clicked against the marble, the sound too loud in the sudden hush. Mom spoke first. We didn't know, Elise. My God. Her hand reached for mine but hovered just shy of contact. I didn't move. Then Dad stepped forward. His voice was tight, practiced, like he'd already rehearsed it. You should have told us. I raised an eyebrow. Would it have mattered? He looked at me then. Really looked. I watched the muscles in his jaw tighten. The department's media team. They're doing a follow-up piece on emergency response heroes. They might want to interview you and, well, Ken thinks it would be meaningful if the family presented you with something too. You know, a statement of pride. A statement of pride. I echoed deadpan. Yes, Mom jumped in, a little too quickly. And maybe we could do a little brunch next week. Invite the neighbors. It's such a powerful story. There it was. The turn. It wasn't about me. It was about the story. The story that could be polished, packaged, posted with a filter. The story that would make them look like the proud, loving parents of a hero. Even if they'd once told people I was just doing contract work for schools or something. I took a breath. Cool. Controlled. No. They both blinked. What? Dad asked. No brunch, no statement, no parade, not now. Elise, I saved a life, and then I rebuilt mine. Quietly. Alone. Because you both made it clear years ago that my life wasn't something you could brag about. Mom's lip quivered. We were just trying to help you find your way. No, I cut in. You were trying to steer me back to a version of success that you understood. You wanted med school, white coats, a daughter you could point to at dinner parties. Dad crossed his arms. You think I'm not proud now? I think you're proud because your boss stood up and said my name into a microphone, I said. Not because you knew anything about what I went through. The silence stretched like a thin rope. Finally, Dad said, You're overreacting. We're just trying to do the right thing now. No, I said softly. You're trying to rewrite the ending. I turned and walked out before they could say anything else. The air outside was warm and smelled faintly of exhaust and gardenias. I didn't cry. I just walked. Block after block, heels clicking against sidewalk, until I reached my car. Inside, I sat for a long time with the engine off, hands folded in my lap. Then I laughed. Not a happy laugh. More like the kind that bubbles up when something breaks in a beautiful way, like an old dam finally cracking. Later that night, my phone buzzed. A text from my cousin Rachel. You were amazing tonight. I never knew. I'm sorry. Another from someone I didn't even remember speaking to. That was so inspiring. You really are the strongest person in this family. Then, at the bottom, a message from Mom. We're proud of you. You've come a long way. Let's talk more about how to share your story with the community. It could really make an impact. And there it was again. The pivot. The packaging. I turned the phone face down. That night, I sat at my tiny kitchen table, a half glass of wine sweating onto the wood, and pulled the metal out from the drawer again. I held it up to the overhead light. It gleamed. Unchanged. Unafraid. And in that quiet, I realized something. Recognition isn't redemption, and applause never rewrites the silence that came before. The letter came 2 days later. Thick envelope, formal letterhead, waxy seal. Inside, an invitation. The State Civic Foundation formally invites Elise Moreno to speak at the annual Emergency Services Recognition Gala. My first instinct was to ignore it, trash it, disappear again, because I knew how this went. People applauded for 5 minutes and forgot you by Friday. But then I got another message, this time from Eli's mother. She'd found me through Ken. Her email was short. I never knew who you were. I never got to thank you. But every birthday, every school play, every moment with my son, I've silently thanked the woman who gave him back to me. I hope someday you'll let me say it in person. I stared at those words until they blurred, and suddenly, I knew I couldn't go back to hiding. But I couldn't go back to my family either. Because just as they'd tried to shrink me for years, they were now trying to inflate me into something they could use. That weekend, I agreed to speak at the gala. I told no one. Not Mom. Not Dad. Not even the cousin who'd messaged me 6 times asking for a quote for her newsletter. I picked a dress I hadn't worn in years. Dark plum, clean lines, simple neckline. I stood in front of the mirror, smoothing the fabric, my hand brushing the scar at my collarbone. It no longer made me flinch. The ballroom buzzed with people. First responders, nurses, EMTs, volunteers. I saw others with visible burns, limp wrists, braces, scars on their cheeks. I wasn't alone. When they called my name, I walked to the podium on legs that remembered fire and ash but stood steady anyway. I took a deep breath. No papers, no notes, just breath. Most people think heroism happens in a moment, I began. But the truth is, it happens in silence, in the recovery, in the part no one wants to hear about. The room was quiet. Chairs didn't shift. Wine glasses froze mid-air. I was a paramedic for 7 years. I carried people out of wreckage, out of overdoses, out of situations they never thought they'd survive. And then one day, I was the one who didn't make it out clean. I paused, hands lightly gripping the podium. I stopped breathing to save a 10-year-old boy. I still have dreams about it. I wake up coughing. I sleep sitting up. I haven't worked a full emergency shift since. A murmur moved through the crowd. Understanding, not pity. But what no one tells you is that coming back doesn't mean going back. It means rebuilding. It means finding a new way to serve. I spoke about my survival workshops, the students, the community centers, the quiet dignity of showing teenagers how to bandage a wound or navigate panic in a smoke-filled hallway. When I finished, they stood, all of them, clapping not like they were watching a performance, but like they'd just been seen. I stepped down. Tears pricked the corners of my eyes. And then, from the far side of the room, a slow clap. Then a voice. Elise? I turned. Dad. In a suit I'd seen 100 times, standing near the exit, half in shadow, as if even now he wasn't sure he belonged in this version of my story. I nodded once, didn't smile, didn't wave, just nodded. He didn't approach me, didn't ask to speak, didn't offer a ride or a comment or a strategy. He left before the end of the night. Which, honestly, felt about right. Because there are some things even applause can't fix. And sometimes, the truest boundary is the one you don't explain. Back at my apartment, I unlocked the safe. The checks were still there. All of them. I sat with them spread out in front of me. A ledger of loss and survival and silence, and I made a decision. Not to spend them, to invest them, in something that couldn't be ignored, something that didn't need anyone's permission to matter. I started drafting the proposal that night, a place for training, for healing, for fire survivors, for teens in foster care, for first responders with nowhere to go after the job breaks them open. No plaques, no uniforms, just skills and strength and safety. It would be called the Ember Project, because even burned wood still glows. Winter settles into Sacramento like a whisper, soft, damp, slow to let go. By the time the frost kisses the windows of my apartment, the Ember Project is more than an idea. It's a blueprint, a location, a partnership with a community center on the south side, where kids walk home past sirens every night and think trauma is just another part of growing up. We open quietly, no ribbon cutting, no press releases, just me, a few volunteers, and 17 students, ages 13 to 19, most of them angry, cautious, smart in the ways that survival demands. The first day, I teach them how to splint a broken wrist with a pencil and a sock. They laugh, but they remember. By week 2, they start showing up early. By month 2, they bring their friends. They ask questions. Is it true you pulled someone out of a fire? Did it hurt? Were you scared? I always answer the same way. Yes, yes, and yes. Because I want them to know you can be scared and still do the thing, still save the life, still walk through the smoke and out the other side. I hear from Eli again. He's applying to college now, wants to study environmental science. He says he wants to protect the world that almost ended him. His mom sends a photo of us, snapped outside the gala when he gave me a hug and said, "I'm breathing because of you." I keep that photo on my desk, right next to the medal. And then, 3 months after the gala, a letter arrives, Handwritten. Thick cream paper. My mother's script. Dear Elise, we read about the Ember Project in the paper. Your father cut it out and put it on the fridge. I think it's the first time we've had your face there since prom. We were wrong. Not just in how we handled your choices, but in how we made you feel like they didn't count unless we could explain them to our friends. You were never the embarrassment. You were the one burning quietly so others could see. We understand that now, and we are sorry. Love, Mom and Dad. I fold it, press it flat, and tuck it beside the letter of commendation from the state. They sit together now. 2 different recognitions. 2 different truths. One earned in flame, the other in absence. I don't call them back, but I write a letter. Simple. Honest. I forgive you. But I no longer belong to the version of me that needed your permission to matter. If you'd like to know the real me, you're welcome to come to the center. Just don't come with cameras. Come with questions. I never get a reply, but that's okay. Because I'm not waiting anymore. I've learned that sometimes healing doesn't look like holding hands at the table again. Sometimes it looks like lighting your own table. Opening it to strangers who've lived through fire too. Serving warmth without shame. And if anyone asks what happened to the girl who once embarrassed her father, tell them she saved a life, then saved her own, and then made it her mission to teach others how to do the same. Tell them she burned, and glowed, and rebuilt, without applause. Because sometimes the greatest act of courage is choosing to be fully visible, even when the people who should have seen you never did. If my story moved you, please consider subscribing. Drop a comment. Tell me your name, your story, your survival. Tell me where you're listening from and what fire you've walked through. Because you're not alone. Not anymore. Thank you for staying with me. I'll see you next time.